Thanks for coming.
Can you hold it up to your mouth?
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this. This is good. I was going to bring.
What's your name, sir?
My name is Jim Marquette.
Hey, Jim, hold the mic real close to your mouth.
I was going to bring a whole bunch of numbers here tonight, but my wife wouldn't let me do it. Because I lost my job about a year ago, and I've got a lot of time on my hands, so I'm really looking at it. But anyhow, the biggest problem that I have is that I looked through the budget numbers for the last 10 years. In 2000, the total federal budget was $1.8 trillion. It's now $3.6 trillion just 10 years later. That's 7% a year over 10 years. If that same trend takes place over the next 10 years, we're going to hit $7 trillion a year, and in that 10-year period, we're going to spend over $55 trillion. How am I doing so far?
You're doing right.
About right?
Right on.
And the Ryan budget's going to cut $4 trillion off of this. That means we're still going to spend $51 trillion. My problem is, when you guys talk about cuts, the Republicans need to get out in front and tell everybody that you're not really cutting anything. You're slowing down growth that's going to occur over the next 10 years.
Let me answer that part of your question.
And then I got another.
Okay. Let me answer that first. You're absolutely correct. And that's why the Ryan budget that we passed in the House was a first step toward heading in that direction. But the bill that we ought to be pushing right now, two things we ought to be pushing: the balanced budget amendment, which if we get to the states, I'm sure it'll pass. We just got to get it through 2/3 of both houses of Congress. But the second thing is, Connie Mack, and I talked to you about this bill I'm co-sponsoring, would reduce overall spending 1% per year, which will cause a lot of pain and heartache, don't misunderstand. But it would get us to a balanced budget. But we have to, some things like the Department of Education, for instance, I would want to do away with. There are other agencies of government. There are other agencies of government where there's a great deal of duplication. And as a businessman, I think it's important that we just go through and cut out those agencies of government and those sub-agencies that really aren't providing anything. For instance, when I was talking about education, the quality of education in America has deteriorated, even though we're spending billions and billions and billions on DOE.
77 billion.
77 billion.
132 billion for the agriculture department.
I don't.
55 billion for Homeland Security, and that's on top of CIA and FBI and Social Security and all that. 55 billion.
You know, first of all, let me just tell you, you're preaching to the choir.
Well, I got a point though with it. I got a point with it. All right, let me make my point.
Sure.
I can go through all these numbers: 47 billion foreign aid, 27 billion State Department, 52 billion HUD, Energy Department, 57 billion. This is the stuff I didn't bring. I've got it committed to memory. But if you put all this together, that's almost $500 billion in just those agencies. Agriculture Department, $132 billion. Really? I mean, that's unbelievable. Then we've got $500 billion for welfare. That's $1 trillion right there, just off the top of my head.
Okay.
And the problem I have with it is that when you guys talk about cuts, the first place the Republicans went is Social Security and Medicare, and you didn't do anything with this. If you want me to
He's right, too. All this money you're giving to other countries.
Okay. First of all, let me just say, the reason...
It's nothing personal, Dan.
You can't stand the heat, get out and pitch there. But the first thing is, the reason that we talked about Medicare and Social Security first is because it's over half of the budget. And it is something that has to be addressed. That and Medicaid. The entitlements have to be addressed, and it has to be addressed in a way that is reasonable and fair, that will sustain the program without throwing the baby out with the bathwater. As far as, I want to make sure you hear me now. As far as these other areas that you're concerned about, nothing should be off the table. Nothing.
Amen.
But you're talking about something like 45% of the budget, which includes defense. If you take defense out of there, you're down now maybe to 30% of the budget. So that 30%, you're absolutely right. We need to go through there, every single agency. I mentioned the Department of Education. There's even waste in some parts of the Defense Department. But what we need to do is have business people in positions who can help us make those decisions. But the people that the president has surrounding him are people that are not business people, they're academics, and they have a socialistic approach to government, Keynesian approach to government. Now, all I can tell you is that here's how we're going to approach it for the next year and a half. We do not have the Senate. And I don't want to get particularly political here, but
we will by 2012.
First of all,
just a small group, the whole country's like this.
okay, well, look, listen, I heard everything you said. Let me answer. And then there's other people who really like to be heard too. Okay. Well, we have 12 appropriation bills. And the appropriation bills, Obama continues to want to increase spending in a whole host of areas. You mentioned welfare, you mentioned food stamps, you mentioned a whole bunch of those things. There's no question that they want to continue and they want to expand those programs. And if you watch C-SPAN or watch the debates, you'll hear them saying, we don't care about the poor, we don't care about the kids in school, we don't care about the lunch programs. And that resonates with a lot of people. So what are we going to do about it? Wherever the president is asking for more money that we don't believe should be spent, we are asking the Appropriations Committee in the House under Hal Rogers of Kentucky to not give him the money. Because if you don't give him the money, he can't spend it. Now, if you cut the spending in an appropriation bill, here's how it works. It goes to the Senate. The Senate is controlled by the president and his party. They will put a lot of this spending back in, and then it goes to what they call a conference committee. And you have people from both the House and the Senate sit down and hammer out their differences. At that point, our conferees have to be like a solid piece of concrete and not move off the spending cuts. Now, that's where we are. You're not going to be able to solve the problems you're talking about in the next 18 months because the White House will not let us do it. The Senate will not let us do it. Now, in the House, we've got problems there too. There's no question about it. There's no question about it. But we will do what we can to cut the spending and send it to the Senate and try to make sure that we don't exacerbate the situation. But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Every single official, now you don't all applaud when I say this, but every single official should be held accountable, whether it's a congressman or a senator or the president. And I would just tell all of you, because you're here because you're concerned, study up on what the congressmen are doing, not only here, but in every district in Indiana and across the country, and tell people if they're big spenders, if they're for more regulation, if they're for more taxes and their record shows it, throw them out. Throw them out. The other thing is, and this is my opinion, the president believes in a socialistic approach to government, and we need to replace him with a business-oriented